our high standards and providing excellent, exciting opportunities for British products.
Right, we have a substantive question to Minister Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The UK Government works with the Scottish Government on a daily basis on a range of constitutional matters, including delivering on our devolution commitments through the Scotland Act Order programme. I would have thought, Mr. Speaker, that a more interesting question would have been to ask what discussions his new party has had with the First Minister on an unnecessary and divisive further referendum and separation.
Let's go up to Neil Hanby. Neil.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When Scotland opens negotiations for independence following the election of a supermajority on the 6th of May, can I ask, will those talks be led by the Secretary of State or the Minister for the Union, should, of course, he still be in post by that time?
Well, I must say to the honourable gentleman, he's been rather presumptuous about the outcome of the elections next week, so let's wait and see what the people of Scotland decide. I would have thought they will be more interested in keeping the protections of the pandemic in place, helping businesses recover and helping children catch up on the education that they've missed over the last year.
That's the end of questions to Secretary of State for Scotland. We're now going to come to the questions for the Prime Minister. I will first call the Prime Minister to answer the engagements question, and then I will call Andrea Jenkins to ask her supplementary. Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I know the thoughts of members across the House are with the people of India. We're supporting India with vital medical equipment, and we will continue to work closely with the Indian authorities to determine what further help they may need. Mr. Speaker, I also welcome last week's Court of Appeal decision to overturn the convictions of 39 former sub-postmasters in the Horizon dispute, an appalling injustice. Sir Wyn Williams is leading an ongoing independent inquiry that will report this summer. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Let's go to Andrea Jenkins. Andrea. You're on mute, I think, Andrea. Have you got the answer? Tell us more about PMQs. I'm sure the Prime Minister knows the answer. Prime Minister. You can't do it. What I'm going to do, I'm going to try and come back. I'm going to go to Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I join the Prime Minister in his remarks about the humanitarian disaster we're witnessing in India? I know the UK has already committed some support, but given the scale and gravity of the disaster, I hope the Foreign Secretary will set out today what more the UK will do to help the Indian people in their hour of need. Can I also join the Prime Minister in his remarks about the Post Office case and ongoing injustice? And of course, today is International Workers' Memorial Day. And this day, this year, after all the sacrifices our frontline workers have made during the pandemic, it's even more poignant than usual. I join in solidarity with all those mourning loved ones today. Mr. Speaker, it was reported this week, including in the Daily Mail, the BBC and ITV, backed up by numerous sources, that at the end of October, the Prime Minister said he would rather have, and I quote, bodies pile high than implement another lockdown. Can the Prime Minister tell the House categorically, yes or no, did he make those remarks or remarks to that effect?
Prime Minister.
No, Mr. Speaker, and I think the right honourable gentleman is a lawyer, I'm given to understand. I think that if he's going to repeat allegations like that, he should come to this House and substantiate those allegations and say where he heard them and who exactly is supposed to have said those. Who exactly is supposed to have said those things, Mr. Speaker? Because what I certainly can tell him, and he asked about the October decisions, they were very bitter very difficult decisions, as they would be for any Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, because no one wants to put this country into a lockdown with all the consequences that means for loss of education, for the damage to people's life chances, to the huge medical backlog that it entails. But it was thanks to that lockdown, the tough decision that we took, Mr. Speaker, and thanks to the heroic efforts of the British people, that we have got through to this stage in the pandemic where we find ourselves rolling out our vaccine, where we've done 50% of the population, 25% of the adult population have now had 2 doses, Mr. Speaker. And lockdowns are miserable. Lockdowns are appalling things to have to do, but I have to say that I believe that we had absolutely no choice.
Yes, Tom.
Well, somebody here isn't telling the truth. The House will have heard the Prime Minister's answer, and I remind him the Ministerial Code says, and I quote, "Ministers who knowingly mislead Parliament will be expected to offer their resignation." I'll leave it there for now. Turning to another issue, there'll be further on this, believe you me, who initially, and Prime Minister, initially is the key word here, who initially paid for the redecoration of his Downing Street flat?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, when it comes to misleading Parliament, he may recollect that it was only a few weeks ago that he said that he didn't oppose this government, this country staying in the leaving the European Medicines Agency. The fact that he was then forced to retract and leaving the European Medicines Agency was absolutely invaluable for our vaccine rollout. And actually, it was just last week that he said that James Dyson. He said that James Dyson was a personal friend of mine. A fact that James Dyson has corrected in the newspaper this morning. As for the latest stuff that he's bringing up, he should know that I paid for Downing Street refurbishment personally, Mr. Speaker, and I contrast it. And any further declaration that I have to make, I will, if any, I will be advised upon by Lord Guide. But if he talks about housing costs, Mr. Speaker, then the people of this country can make their own decision in just 8 days' time. Because on average, Labour councils charge you £93 more in Band D, the Conservative councils, and Liberal Democrat councils charge you £120 more. That, I think, is the issue. That, I think, is the issue upon which the British people would like him to focus.
Yes, Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, normally when people don't want to incriminate themselves, they go no comment. Let me ask this. Let's explore this a bit further, Prime Minister. Let's ask it a different way. Either, this is the initial invoice, Prime Minister, initial invoice, either the taxpayer paid the initial invoice, or it was the Conservative Party, or it was a private donor, or it was the Prime Minister. So I'm making it easy for the Prime Minister. It's now multiple choice. There are only 4 options. It should be easier than finding the chatty rat, Mr. Speaker. So I ask the Prime Minister again, who paid the initial invoice, Prime Minister, for the redecoration of the Prime Minister's flat, the initial invoice?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I've given him the answer, and the answer is I have covered the costs, and I think most people will find it absolutely bizarre. And of course, there's an Electoral Commission investigating this, and I can tell him that I've conformed in full with the Code of Conduct, with ministerial code, and officials have been have been advising me throughout this whole thing. But I think people will think it absolutely bizarre that he is focusing on this issue. When what people want to know is what plans the Labour government might have to improve the life of people in this country. And let me tell you, if he talks about housing again, we're helping people on the house. I'd rather not spend taxpayers' money, by the way, like the last Labour government, who spent £500,000 of taxpayers' money on the Downing Street flat. I'd rather, yes they did, tarting it up. I would much rather help people get on the property ladder, and it's this Conservative government that has built 244,000 homes in the last year, which is a record over 30 years. This is a government that gets on with delivering on the people's priorities while he continually raises, I think, issues that most people would find irrelevant to their concerns.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, he talks of priorities. What's he spending his time doing? This is a Prime Minister who, during the pandemic, was nipping out of meetings to choose wallpaper at £840 a roll. Just last week, he spent his time phoning journalists to moan about his old friend Dominic Cummings. And he's telling the civil service to find out who paid for the redecoration in his flat. The Cabinet Secretary has been asked to investigate who paid for the refurbishments in the flat. Why doesn't the Prime Minister just tell him? That would be the end of the investigation. Mr. Speaker, it's been widely reported that Lord Brownlow, who just happens to have been given a peerage by the Conservative Party, was asked to donate £58,000 to help repay for the cost of this refurbishment. Can the Prime Minister, if he's so keen to answer, confirm, did Lord Brownlow make that payment for that purpose?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I think I've answered this question several times now, and the answer is that I have covered the costs. I have met the requirements that I've been obliged to meet in full. And when it comes to the taxpayer and the costs of Number 10 Downing Street, it was the previous Labour government. I think Tony Blair racked up a bill of £350,000. And I think what the people of this country want to see is minimising taxpayer expense. They want to see a government that's focused on their needs and delivering more homes for the people of this country and cutting council tax, which is what we're doing. And it's on that basis that I think people are going to judge our parties on May the 6th.
Keir Starmer.
Answer the question. That's what the public scream at their televisions every PMQs. Answer the question. The Prime Minister hasn't answered the question. He knows he hasn't answered the question. He never answers the question. The Prime Minister will be aware that he's required to declare any benefits that relate to his political activities, including loans or credit arrangements, within 28 days. 28 days, Prime Minister, yes. He will also know that any donation must be recorded in the register of ministers' interests, and that under the law, any donation of over £500 to a political party must be registered and declared. So the rules are very clear. The Electoral Commission now think that there are reasonable grounds to suspect that an offence or offences may have occurred. That's incredibly serious. Can the Prime Minister tell the House, does he believe that any rules or laws have been broken in relation to the refurbishment of the Prime Minister's flat?
Prime Minister.
No, I don't, Mr. Speaker. What I believe has been strained to breaking point is the credulity of the public. He has half an hour every week to put serious and sensible questions to me about the state of the pandemic, about the vaccine rollout, about what we're doing to support our NHS, about what we're doing to fight crime, about what we're doing to bounce back from this pandemic, about the economic recovery, about jobs for the people of this country. And he goes on and on, Mr. Speaker, about wallpaper when, as I've told him umpteen times now, I paid for it.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, can I remind the Prime Minister of the No11 principles, which are meant to govern the behaviour of those in public office? They're these: selflessness, integrity, objectivity, accountability, openness, honesty, and leadership. Instead, what do we get from this Prime Minister and this Conservative government? Dodgy contracts, jobs for their mates, and cash for access. And who's at the heart of it? The Prime Minister, Major Sleaze, sitting there. Mr. Speaker, meanwhile, he talks about priorities. Crime is going up. NHS waiting lists are at record levels, and millions of people are worried about their jobs, including Liberty Steel. Mr. Speaker, don't the British people deserve a Prime Minister they can trust and a government that isn't mired in sleaze, cronyism and scandal?
Mr. Speaker, last week he came to this chamber and he attacked me for talking to James Dyson about ventilators, where we're now sending ventilators to help the people of India. And the following day, Mr. Speaker, the Labour front bench said that any Prime Minister in my position would have done exactly the same thing. It wasn't only a few months ago that they were actually attacking Kate Bingham, saying she was a crony, when she helped to set up the vaccine task force that delivered millions of vaccines for the people of this country, Mr. Speaker, and helping us to get out of the pandemic. This is a government that is getting on with delivering on the people's priorities. We're rolling out many more nurses, 10,000 more nurses in the NHS now than there were this time last year, 8,771 more police officers on our streets now than there were when I was elected, including tougher sentences, Mr. Speaker, for serious sexual and violent criminals, which he opposed, Mr. Speaker. We're getting on, and by the way, I forgot to mention it. Last night, our friends in the European Union voted to approve our Brexit deal, which he opposed. Which enables us not just to take back control of our borders, Mr. Speaker, but to deliver free, which it does, which he fervently opposed, enabling us, amongst other things, to deal with such threats as the European Super League, Mr. Speaker, but it enables us to deliver free ports in places like Teesside, and above all, taking back control of our country has allowed us to deliver the fastest vaccine rollout in Europe, as he well knows, Mr. Speaker, which would not have been possible if we'd stayed in the European Medicines Agency, which he voted for. Mr. Speaker, week after week, the people of this country can see the difference between a Labour Party that twists and turns with the wind, that thinks of nothing except playing political games, whereas this party gets on with delivering on the people's priorities, and I hope that people will vote Conservative on May the 6th.
Let's see if we can calm it down a little. Joy Morrissey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The UK is indeed a world leader in COVID-19 vaccination. May I thank the Prime Minister for the swift action he has taken to deliver this for our country. And will the Prime Minister join me in thanking the many local volunteers, such as Kirsty Griffith, who has been volunteering at the Marlow Vaccine Centre, and Guy Hullis and Paul Bass, who have been volunteering alongside the Denham Community Health. And thank you for the vaccine rollout in South Bucks.
Prime Minister.
My honourable friend should thank everybody involved, and it's been a fantastic national effort led by the NHS, led by overwhelmingly by GPs, but also by many others, by local council officers, officials, by the army, by many others, and of course huge numbers of volunteers in her constituency and elsewhere. And I thank Kirsty Griffiths, Guy Hollis and Paul Bass very much for everything they've done.
Let's go to the Leader of the SNP, Ian Blackford. Ian.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I associate myself with the remarks of the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition over the humanitarian crisis in India and the injustice over the Horizon issue at the Post Office. Mr. Speaker, over 127,000 people have died from COVID in the United Kingdom. People have lost their mothers and fathers, their grandparents and even their children. NHS staff have given their all, fighting to keep people alive. That's why so many people find the Prime Minister's remark that he would rather let their bodies pile high in their thousands than go into lockdown utterly sickening. The BBC and ITV have multiple sources confirming that this is what the Prime Minister said. People are willing to go under oath, Mr. Speaker, confirming that the Prime Minister said these exact words, under oath, Mr. Speaker. Now, parliamentary rules stop me from saying that the Prime Minister has repeatedly lied to the public over the last week. But can I ask the question, are you a liar, Prime Minister?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I leave it to you to judge whether the right honourable gentleman's remarks were in order. But what I will say to him is that...
Say, unfortunately, we're in order, but we're not savoury and not what we would expect.
I'm grateful to you, Mr. Speaker. But what I would say to the right honourable gentleman is that if he is going to relay that kind of quotation, it is up to him in a place like Parliament to produce the author. The person who claims to have heard it, because I can't find them. He says that they're willing to go on oath. Perhaps they're sitting somewhere in this building. I rather doubt it, because I didn't say those words. What I do believe is that a lockdown is a miserable, miserable thing. And I did everything I could to try to protect the British public throughout the pandemic, to protect them from lockdowns, but also to protect them from disease. And he's right to draw attention to the wretched toll that COVID has brought. And we grieve. I know the whole House grieves for every family that has lost a loved one. It has been a horrendous time. But it is thanks to that lockdown and the vaccine rollout, combined with the vaccine rollout, that we're making the progress we are. And I may say we're making progress across the whole of the United Kingdom.
Let's go back to Ian Blackford. Ian.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And of course, it's the Prime Minister's behaviour which is not in order. This is a Prime Minister who is up to his neck in a swamp of Tory sleaze. We've seen contracts for cronies, texts for tax breaks, and cash for curtains. The Prime Minister has dodged these questions all week, and he's dodged them again today. But these questions simply are not going to go away. So when exactly was money funneled through Tory HQ into his personal bank account? When did he pay back this money? Was it an interest-free loan? And who is the donor or donors who originally funded it? Is the Prime Minister aware that if he continues to fail to answer these questions, that the Electoral Commission has the powers to prosecute him? Will the Prime Minister publish these details today, or is he going to wait until the police come knocking at his door?
Mr. Speaker, as I've said, I look forward to what the Electoral Commission has to say, but I can tell him that for the rest of it, he's talking complete nonsense. And the only thing I will say is that it is thanks to our investment in policing that we're going to have another 20,000 more officers on the streets of our country, and that is a fantastic thing. And we will be making sure that gets through to Scotland as well. What we want to see is a Scottish nationalist government stop obsessing about breaking up our country, which is all they can think about and talk about tackling crime and using that investment to fight crime, which is, I think, what the people of Scotland want to see.
Gary Shamrock.
If the Prime Minister was to walk down Bristol Road South in Longbridge today, he would see a small army of JCB diggers levelling out the old MG Rover Westworks site to provide one of the biggest levelling up projects locally, with 5,000 extra jobs at an industrial site. But what people want to see too is a regeneration of Northfield High Street with a proper plan and money on the table. And so does the Prime Minister agree with me that we need people like Andy Street's driven and energetic mayors delivering for the West Midlands, working with me and local Conservative councillors to deliver on this plan? Because after all, Mr. Speaker, teamwork makes the dream work.
Mr. Speaker, I'm lost in admiration for what Andy Street is doing. He's a fantastic mayor of the West Midlands, and he's got a fantastic vision for transport, for jobs, for growth and recovery, and I hope everybody votes for Andy Street on May the 6th.
Right, let us go to Liz Saville-Roberts. Liz.
Diolch yn fawr, Lefarydd. I think it's worth repeating the Ministerial Code 7 guiding principles. Selflessness, integrity, objectivity, accountability, openness, honesty and leadership. The Prime Minister has spent the week ticking them off on his don't do list. At the same time, he tries to play down allegations of saying, let the bodies pile high. Given that the sole judge on questions relating to the conduct of ministers and the conduct of the Prime Minister is the Prime Minister himself, what happens when a Prime Minister goes rogue?
Mr. Speaker, the people of this country have a chance to make their own minds up on May the 6th. And when they look at what's happening in Wales, Mr. Speaker, they have a chance to make a choice between what I'm afraid a continually failing Welsh Labour government or Welsh Conservative administration in Cardiff that I believe has a fantastic vision. 65,000 high-skilled, high-paid jobs, doing up finally addressing the problems of the A55, getting 5,000 more teachers, 3,000 more nurses into the Welsh NHS, solving the problems of the M4, which I've spoken about so movingly many times in this chamber before, Mr. Speaker. I hope that people will avoid voting for Plaid Cymru and that they will vote for Welsh Conservatives on May the 6th in Wales.
Duncan Baker.
Mr. Speaker, as probably the only former sub-postmaster in Parliament. Last Friday's ruling was the beginning, not the end. Yes, it will cost a lot of money, and yes, it would take time, and there is more compensation that is needed. But does the Prime Minister agree with me that only a proper judge-led public inquiry can really bring justice to those victims of this horrendous accounting scandal, and also hold to account those involved behind the scenes?
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for his expertise in this matter, and thank him for what he has just said, because he's totally right. I think that what happened to those post office workers, the postmasters, the sub-postmasters, was appalling. It was one of the biggest miscarriages of justice in our history, Mr. Speaker, and we are looking indeed at the issues involved, and the former High Court Judge Sir Win Williams will be making recommendations about what further actions, what further apologies we need to make.
Let's go to Howell Williams. Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The PM just raised the matter of the Welsh general election. Well, in March last year, this United Kingdom Conservative government intercepted a deal between Wales and the Roche Pharmaceutical Company for 5,000 daily COVID tests, instructing the company to reserve all additional COVID tests to England. Those tests would have been crucial to saving thousands of lives in Wales. So, as we go to the polls next week, will the Prime Minister tell us why Welsh lives meant so little to him?
Mr. Speaker, I'm afraid the honourable gentleman is completely wrong in what he says about tests, but I can tell them that he's right about one thing, which is that Wales has made an amazing contribution to our UK fight back against COVID. And it was incredible to go to the Wockhart factory in Wrexham, to go to that site. And it's Wockhart working together with Oxford Biomedica that has enabled us to roll out the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, Mr. Speaker, that has made such a difference. And I want to say a massive thank you again to those Welsh scientists, all those people working in that factory, because they have helped to save countless lives across the UK.
Laura Farris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The integrated review confirms the vital role the atomic weapons establishment in Berkshire will play in our future nuclear capability. I want to pay tribute to them, and particularly to the senior female employees who have won a slew of national awards for their work in defence, science, engineering and nuclear security. Given the government's significant investment in all these sectors, would my right honourable friend say how he plans to improve women's participation in these fields, where they've been historically underrepresented, and could I invite him to the AWE to illustrate our success?
Yes. Prime Minister.
I would be honoured to take up her invitation as soon as I can. In terms of the female representation in that sector, she should, of course, knows that Alison Atkinson became the Chief Executive Officer and Managing Director of AWE in May 2020, and there are huge numbers of opportunities for women to join our armed services, thanks, Mr. Speaker, above all, to the biggest uplift in defence spending since the end of the Cold War.
Let's go to Sarah Upholme.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the Prime Minister's commitment last week to include aviation and shipping into our target emissions. But surely the Prime Minister knows that we will miss this target if we proceed with a third runway at Heathrow. And furthermore, that would undermine the progress that this government hopes to make towards net zero. So will the Prime Minister take this opportunity to commit to amending the airport's national policy statement in light of these commitments?
Mr. Speaker, the third runway at Heathrow is, as she knows, a private sector venture. It's up to them to produce the capital to do it. I don't see any immediate sign of that particular project coming off. I think what we should be looking at instead, and what we are looking at, is the prospect of jet zero aviation, Mr. Speaker, of flying without carbon emissions, or with far lower carbon emissions. And it is in that area that the Department of the Bays and the DFT are working together with the manufacturers so that this country leads in guilt-free flying.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Right now, in every part of the country, levels of business optimism are higher than they have been since the start of the pandemic, with many firms planning to hire more staff and create more apprenticeships for our young people. And there's one factor, more than anything else, that underpins that optimism, and that is the success of the UK vaccination programme. So does my right honourable friend agree with me that there's never been a more important moment for voters in Scotland and in Wales to reject the negativity and the divisiveness of the nationalists and instead look forward to a brighter and stronger future as one united kingdom?
Absolutely. I don't know why the shadow leader's PPS is shaking her head, because surely she would agree with that. We want to work together across the whole of the UK, and I pay tribute to, as I have just said, to the incredible work of the Watcart factory in Wales, but there's also the Valneva factory in Scotland, and the whole of the United Kingdom coming together, represented by our armed services and above all by our NHS, helping to deliver that vaccine rollout to protect the country and take it forward.
Let's go to Janet Davey. Janet.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is absolutely shocking that we have heard the Electoral Commission is investigating funding of the Prime Minister's Downing Street flat, saying there are reasonable grounds to suspect an offence. Why does the Prime Minister think all of these stories about sleaze, corruption and dishonesty keep happening to him and his Conservative government?
I tell you what, Mr. Speaker, I think it's because people are absolutely determined to find anything they can hang on to talk about except the vaccine rollout, except our plans to unite and level up across the country, except our plans to fight crime and give people the opportunity to buy their own homes, because they don't want to discuss those issues, because they can't win on those issues, Mr. Speaker, because they've got absolutely nothing to say. And that's what's become clear over the last year.
Let's go to Nick Fletcher. Nick.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before I ask my question, may I first ask the Prime Minister to join me in thanking all the staff at Doncaster Royal Infirmary and the emergency services for dealing swiftly with a major water leak yesterday. Fortunately, no one was hurt and all patients have been moved safely to other wards. However, back to my original question, the local elections are only days away. I would therefore like to ask the Prime Minister if he would offer his full support to Doncaster Conservative mayoral candidate James Hart. James, like me, is a local businessman and will shout up for our town and work closely with me on delivering the government's levelling up agenda.
Minister.
Well, look, my honourable friend is absolutely right. First of all, hang on, he's right, Mr. Speaker, to want to thank all the staff of Doncaster Royal Infirmary for what they did for the emergency services in dealing with the incident last night. And I'm glad to take that opportunity. But I'm also glad to take the opportunity to support him in his campaign for James Hart. And I do hope that the people of Doncaster will go out to vote and support him on May the 6th.
Let's come to Christian Matheson.
Speaker, the Prime Minister promised in a series of texts to fix a tax issue for his mate, Sir James Dyson. At that dispatch box last week, he promised to publish those texts, but of course he's not made good on that promise. So when will he publish them?
Mr. Speaker, I promised to publish the account of my dealings with James Dyson, which is exactly what I have done. And I can't believe they don't learn their lesson, Mr. Speaker. They attacked the government for having any kind of discussions with a British ventilator maker last week, or potential ventilator maker last week, and then the following day they did a U-turn and said that any Prime Minister would do it, and they've now done a double U-turn, Mr. Speaker, and they're trying to bash me again. Which is it? Do you believe the government should be supporting British manufacturing delivering ventilators? Yes or no? That's the question for Labour.
Let's go to Dr. Luke Evans. Luke.
Mr. Speaker, my constituency is best for Battle of Bosworth, but we also have many other attractions like Twycross Zoo, Mallory Racecourse, Burbage Common and Thornton Reservoir. Now, these attractions all support superb cafes and pubs. With the bank holiday weekend coming up, does the Prime Minister have any plans? Does he want to pop up to Bosworth? But more importantly, what is the government doing to support these attractions and domestic tourism as we go into the summer?
I want to thank my honourable friend. I want to tell him that no matter how many pints I joined him in lifting in the pubs of Bosworth, but it could not do as much for the economy of Bosworth as what we're already doing with the £56 million Welcome Back Fund, probably even more welcome than my presence in Bosworth. I venture to suggest, hotly contested perhaps, and that we've extended the cut in VAT for tourism and hospitality to 5% right the way through till the end of September.
Let's go to Lillian Greenwood. Lillian.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Isn't the truth behind all of this, the sleaze, the scandals, the jobs for your mates, the cash for curtains, that the Prime Minister thinks that rules, laws and decency are for other people? The sort of people who shop at John Lewis or IKEA or Argos, who don't have wealthy donors to fund their lifestyle, not for people like him and his ministers.
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I think what people think is that the Labour Party are losing all the arguments across British politics. They've got nothing to say. They've got no plan for our future and no vision for our country. They see a Conservative government that is getting on with uniting and levelling up with the most ambitious agenda any government has had for generations. And I think that's what they're listening to.
Let's go to Ben Bradley. Ben.
Prime Minister, next week residents here in Nottinghamshire will go out to vote for the first time since that incredibly successful 2019 election, where they elected a full slate of Conservative MPs across every constituency in this county. Despite that success, many areas like Mansfield and much of the new Blue Wall across the Midlands and North will still have mainly Labour councillors at a local level. Does my right honourable friend have a message for Nottinghamshire voters who have the opportunity next week to elect a Conservative local team that can work with our MPs to deliver for Nottinghamshire?
I do, and I want to thank him for all the wonderful work that he does for his constituency. My message would be, yes, I hope that people of Nottinghamshire will get out and vote Conservative, because it's we who share your priorities on crime, on the NHS, on investment in infrastructure and on levelling up across our country. So I hope you will vote Conservative on May the 6th.
Right, let us go to Rachel Hopkins. Rachel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When was the Prime Minister and his Chief of Staff first made aware of the plan for a European Super League?
I first was made aware of the plan for a European Super League on, I think, the Sunday night, and we acted decisively, using the arsenal of legislative freedoms that we now have, thanks to leaving the European Union, which he opposed, of course. But we acted decisively to make clear that the UK government took a dim view of this matter, Mr. Speaker, and the same goes for my Chief of Staff.
Siobhan Bailey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituency of Stroud recently won the Best Place to Live, and there is much to visit there, including a historic lamp standard that was erected to celebrate Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee. And next year, our own Queen will mark her succession to the throne of 70 years. And I would ask the Prime Minister, will he join me in supporting the gift being proposed by Parliament to mark Her Majesty's Platinum Jubilee?
I want to thank my honourable friend for a wonderful proposal, and I would certainly encourage all colleagues to support and to contribute to her project.
We're now going to go back to Andrea Jenkins. Andrea.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Next week we will elect our first mayor of West Yorkshire. Now, does the Prime Minister agree with me that for far too long Labour have taken our northern heartlands for granted? On Thursday, the 6th of May, we'll have the opportunity to elect patriotic, hard-working northerners like Matt Robinson, Ben Houchin and Jill Mortimer in Hartlepool. They will be strong voices and champions for infrastructure and housing and jobs. We must seize this chance to build back better after the pandemic, and that only the Conservatives will deliver on this.
Well, Mr. Speaker, they don't like that sort of thing, do they? They don't like focusing. They don't like focusing on the issues that actually matter to the British people and the people of West Yorkshire. I thank my honourable friend. She's absolutely right. I hope they will go. The people on May the 6th will get out and vote for a party that believes in supporting our NHS, that believes in fighting crime, not being soft on crime, and that will bring jobs and regeneration across the entire country. And I hope that they will vote Conservative on May the 6th.
Order. I'm now suspending the House for 3 minutes to enable the necessary arrangements for the next business. We now come to the urgent question. I call Lisa Nandy, the Show Secretary, for the urgent question.
To ask the Secretary of State for Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Affairs if he will make a statement on the support the government is providing to the Indian government.
Adam.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The heartbreaking scenes in India in recent days have shocked us all. The pandemic has brought horrific human suffering, and we send our solidarity and condolences to the Indian people at this difficult time. As the Prime Minister has said, we stand side by side with India as a friend and partner in the fight against COVID-19. The Foreign Secretary spoke with his counterpart, the Minister for External Affairs, Jai Shankar, on the 26th of April. He emphasised the UK's commitment to provide urgent medical equipment to support our Indian friends at this difficult time. Ministers and officials are in close contact with counterparts in the Indian government to follow up on that commitment. The government of India told us that oxygen has been a particular challenge, so we moved quickly to deliver a package of medical equipment to address this need. The first shipment, Mr. Speaker, of 200 ventilators and 95 oxygen concentrators arrived in India in the early hours of yesterday and is already being distributed to Indian hospitals. A further 400 oxygen concentrators will follow today and tomorrow. This equipment will boost the oxygen supplies in India's hospitals, which remain under severe pressure. So it's without doubt that support provided by the United Kingdom will save lives. I'm pleased that other countries are also responding to India's needs. The pandemic has shown the importance of international action. No one is safe until everyone is safe, so we'll keep working closely with the Indian government to help them meet the huge challenge they face, and we'll continue to show our solidarity with the Indian people. This response is just a part of the UK's wider international efforts to tackle the pandemic. The United Kingdom has committed up to £1.3 billion of official development assistance funding to address the health, economic and humanitarian impacts of COVID-19. We've been at the forefront of efforts to get vaccines to developing countries. We are one of the largest donors to the COVAX Advanced Market Commitment, created to do just that. Our commitment of £548 million will support the distribution of 1.3 billion doses of vaccines to up to 92 low and middle income countries. This includes India. Despite the urgency of the current situation in India, this remains an important year in the UK-India relationship. India is a key partner for the UK, and the Prime Minister had planned to visit India this week. Regretfully, he had to postpone due to the COVID-19 outbreak, and he now has plans to speak to Prime Minister Modi via video link in the coming period to take forward key deliverables across trade, defence, climate change, health and migration. We also look forward to the Prime Minister meeting Prime Minister Modi at the UK-hosted G7 summit in June, and to welcoming India's guest participation in the G7 Foreign and Development Ministerial meeting next week. Subject to the COVID-19 situation in India, there may also be an opportunity for the Prime Minister to visit in person later in the year. Mr. Speaker, we stand with the Indian people in this time of need, taking our lead from what the Indian government advises is most useful. We face this pandemic together, and the UK will continue to support global efforts to overcome the grave challenges that we all face today.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The domestic tragedy engulfing India is now of such a scale that it constitutes a global emergency. India is now afflicted with at least 40% of all new cases in the world. More than 2 million have been confirmed in the last week alone, and the peak of this crisis may yet be weeks away. This surely ought to be a priority for the Foreign Secretary, who I would have expected to have made a statement to this House as the scale of the crisis became clear over the last 10 days. For more than 1 million Britons with loved ones in India, this is a moment of fear and anxiety. The ties between our countries are woven into the fabric of this nation, something that through my own heritage I am personally and acutely aware of. Many Britons of Indian origin will have gone to work today in our NHS, in our care homes, helping to carry us through this crisis while desperately worried about loved ones in India. We can and must do more. So can I hear from the Minister today a clear plan to ramp up the delivery of vital equipment? I welcome the 600 pieces of equipment that we have shipped so far, but he will know through his discussions, as I do, that India is still badly short of oxygen, cylinders, concentrators, ventilators and therapeutic drugs, especially remdesivir. He must coordinate with our global partners. I spoke to the EU ambassador this morning to discuss how we can avoid duplication and get help quickly to where it is most needed. Has the UK been part of discussions at the UN and with the World Health Organization? He needs a plan for increasing the production and manufacturing capacity for vaccines and to overcome barriers to expanding supply. And I was surprised, Mr. Speaker, not to hear a commitment to make good on the Health Secretary's promise to throw open our unique expertise to the world. We are world leaders in genomic sequencing and epidemiology. Tracking mutations and variants would be a major contribution, not just to India, but to the world. Mr. Speaker, it's now almost a year to the day when the UK, steeped in our own crisis, woefully unprepared for the pandemic, was forced to ask the world for help. It was India who stepped forward and approved the export of 3 million packets of paracetamol in an act of solidarity and of friendship. There are millions of people in India, around the world, and here in the UK, for whom this is really a test of the bond between our two nations. I heard what he said. I thank him for his warm words, but words are not enough. Now is the time to step forward with a real plan of action to tackle this domestic tragedy and this global emergency.
Well, I thank the Honourable Lady for her questions. I can, if I could just say to the Honourable Lady, the Foreign Secretary may very well have answered this question today, but he is in Geneva speaking to the UN, so he's out of the country. What I would say, and she makes some good points, particularly over the cooperation we've seen from the Indian people, the Indian government specifically around drugs last year. We're very thankful for the support we had in that regard. But what I would say, she references words, not deeds. I think what you've seen over the weekend is deeds, not words. We were the first country to deliver support to the Indian people. In fact, Mr. Speaker, well, it is absolutely the case. We've been described by the BBC, no less. The UK has been commended for the speed of its initial package. They described it as the first international shipment aimed at stemming a devastating COVID-19 surge. I'm not entirely sure how much quicker we could have been. We've been working on this late last week, over the weekend. I'd like to thank our staff across our networks and in the Department of Health for all the work that they've done in putting together this package. So instead of talking, we were shipping and we were delivering these vital pieces of equipment there. And there is more to come, Mr. Speaker, in terms of equipment and support. And we are continuing to speak with the Indian government on what they actually require, and we will respond to what their requirements are in very short order.
Let's go to the Chair of the Select Committee, Tom Tugundar. Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I had the great privilege yesterday of speaking to my Indian opposite number, and he expressed great gratitude for the UK's contribution to support the Indian people. And I must say I was very pleased that he said so. However, India is not the only country with which we have a living bridge and a common feeling. We need to make sure that we are prepared to support other countries in the Commonwealth, and not just for their own benefit, but actually for ours. Could the Minister assure me that we are ready, that we have the ODA budget available, and that we are prepared to act should such a pool of infection arise in any other country, particularly one with which we share such a close link?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend, the chairman of the Select Committee, for that question. Of course, we are speaking with our international partners on a regular basis. This is a situation where no one is safe until everybody is safe. We are working collaboratively. I mean, a good example of that is on the vaccines. Yeah, we are one of the biggest contributors to the vaccine programme, the COVAX programme that's been set up particularly to support countries in this regard. We will continue to do whatever we need to do to support our international partners. What we had to do, because of the pressing emergency in India, which is one of our closest allies, is react quickly, get the equipment into the planes and on the ground, and that's exactly what we have done.
Right, let us go to SNP spokesperson Chris Law. Chris.
Mr. Speaker, the scenes we've all seen emerging from India are truly tragic, and our hearts go out to all those who are suffering. There is nothing more tragic than seeing people dying on pavements outside already overstretched and under-resourced hospitals full of COVID patients, and dead loved ones being lined up for cremation. Sadly, we must recognise that the scenes in India will not be the last of the devastation of COVID that we see, and the UK must step up its efforts, not just in India, but across the world. It is welcome that the UK has been able to offer some support to India, but what assistance is being provided on vaccines to prevent further COVID waves across the country? Furthermore, will the UK government support a waiver to overcome intellectual property barriers so that developing countries have much needed access to vaccines, and we do not see what is happening in India replicated elsewhere? And finally, Mr. Speaker, given the need for a fully resourced global vaccine rollout, will the government finally listen to the experts and retreat from the proposed cut to the UK's life-saving aid at this critical time?
Minister.
Thank you, and thank the honourable gentleman for his question. I mean, it's clear we've been at the forefront, Mr. Speaker, of efforts to get vaccines to developing countries. I can't think of many countries that have done more. I mentioned previously the advanced market commitment via COVAX. This was created to deliver exactly that. We will be supporting the distribution of 1.3 billion doses of vaccines up to 92 low and middle income countries. This does include India and others. We will obviously need to complete our own rollout, and we will be looking to what we do with any particular, if there are any surplus doses available. We'll keep that under constant review. But I'm proud of our commitments, Mr. Speaker, the £548 million and leading the international funding conference last year on vaccines to help protect those who need our assistance.
Let's go to Debbie Abrahams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As in the UK, the impact of COVID in India is a human tragedy. I heard from a family friend in Delhi, and he says people are terrified, frantically looking for beds and oxygen, disgraceful profiteering, ramping up prices, making support unaffordable to the poor. As we've heard, with nearly half of all global COVID cases now in India, and nowhere in the world safe until we're all safe, it was absolutely right that the UK has provided ventilators and oxygen. But there are also issues with vaccination logistics and therapeutic supplies. But can I ask the Foreign Minister what he knows about how Kashmiris in Indian administered Kashmir are faring, given that there has been no opportunity for an independent visit by parliamentarians or journalists to the region since the revocation of Articles 370 and 35A nearly 2 years ago?
Minister.
I thank the honourable lady for a question. I'm not the minister responsible for that particular region, but I know we have regular dialogue. Sorry for that those particular countries, but we have regular dialogue. My honourable friend, the Lord Ahmad, who's the minister responsible for that region, I know speaks on a regular basis with Pakistan, with Indian representatives, and I'm very happy to ask him to give the honourable lady an update.
Let's go to Caroline Noakes. Caroline.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Many of us have constituents deeply worried about loved ones in India. Please can my honourable friend reassure them that the Foreign Secretary will continue to engage with the Indian government about the practical help that is needed and how we can provide it?
Minister.
My honourable friend is absolutely right. My right honourable friend, the Foreign Secretary, has spoken directly in the last few days with Foreign Minister Jai Shankar on exactly this. We're responding on, to the Indian government's request. We are listening to what they're telling us they want. We're responding. We were the first country to respond and get wheels on the ground and deliver equipment. This is a huge emergency that's affecting India. We have responded. We'll continue to speak with the Indian government and see what further assistance we can deliver them.
Scott Benton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given the exceptional budgetary challenges facing the Treasury, the overwhelming majority of my constituents support the decision to temporarily reduce the foreign aid budget. Of course, we will still be spending more money than nearly every other nation on earth on international aid, allowing us to support nations in their hour of need. 9 airline containers full of life-saving equipment have already been shipped out to India, but can my right honourable friend confirm that he will continue to engage with the Indian government to provide any further assistance as required?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend, the member for Blackpool South. He's right to point this out, Mr. Speaker, the support that we've already delivered to our Indian friends. Our teams have been working round the clock and over the weekend to ensure that that first shipment, 200 ventilators, 95 oxygen concentrators, arrived in India yesterday morning. And we, as I said before, we were the first to deliver support there. And given the rapidly changing situation on the ground, we're working closely with our counterparts to ensure that we're coordinated and we're in close contact with the Indian government over anything else that they need.
Let's go to Leila Moran. Leila.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What is happening in India is an absolute tragedy. But it's also a stark warning that this virus thrives when we relax. After all, many in India thought that they had beaten this virus. And every time a surge happens, the virus mutates faster. And with every mutation, our collective fight goes back a step. There is only one way to beat this virus, and that is to work together in lockstep across the global community to keep cases low, minimize the risk of new variants, and vaccinate. So will the Minister now commit to both increasing the money the UK gives to COVAX, much that is, we need to do more, but to also start sharing vaccine doses through COVAX now, today?
I thank the honourable lady for a question. What we are doing, and she's right to ask about vaccine doses, but right now we're moving through the UK prioritisation list. That's what I think the country would expect us to do for our domestic rollout, and we don't currently have surplus doses, but we keep it under constant review. Of course, I recognise that no one is safe until we're all safe with this pandemic, but that's why I'm proud that the United Kingdom, despite the challenging financial pressures that this pandemic has brought us, we've donated over £500 million to COVAX. We've led the international vaccine funding conference last year, encouraging in every conversation that I as a foreign minister and my colleagues have, we're encouraging our counterparts around the globe to do the same and to contribute to COVAX.
Let's go to Gagan Mahindra. Gagan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As someone that has family in India, it breaks my heart to see what is happening there. Some of the most worrying stories coming out of India have been reports of a lack of available oxygen for patients in need. Can my right honourable friend confirm that a key portion of the equipment that our government is delivering is made up of the oxygen concentrators and ventilators that are so desperately needed?
Well, my honourable friend, the member for South West Hertfordshire, speaks from the heart in this. I mean, obviously, as I've already said, I want to thank the teams and the FCDO around the globe for working on this. We've been the first to respond. We are providing the life-saving medical equipment my honourable friend refers to. This includes 495 oxygen concentrators and 200 ventilators. So this is equipment that's based on the most acute need, which has been communicated to us by the Indian government. And it simply, and I understand why people are so passionate about this, this simply will be helping save the lives of the most vulnerable in India.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given the population of India is 1.3 billion and the country is currently recording more than 320,000 new COVID infections every day, does the Minister agree with a senior Indian health official who described the support that has been received so far as a drop in the ocean?
Minister.
Well, what I can tell the honourable lady is we've been first out of the blocks. We've provided from surplus stocks, the ventilators, the oxygen concentrators. Of course, it's a huge country, and that's why we're continuing to liaise with the Indian government to see what further we can do. We are going to be doing more in terms of equipment, but we've responded quicker than anybody else. We've got planes on the ground delivering equipment. There's more planes out there, going out there today and tomorrow with more equipment, and we will continue to work with the Indian government, listen to their requests and respond.
Thank you, Speaker. Gracious as ever. Our special relationship with India is a bond of kinship and affinity rooted in the living bridge that is the Indian diaspora. As we now seek a transformative post-Brexit UK-India relationship, it is only right the government has taken the initial steps to assist India at this unprecedented time. It's been heartening to see 1 billion shoulders to the wheel, be it the Oxygen Express, run by the railways, or the Indian Air Force flying back the empty oxygen tanks for Indian industry to refill, which has risen to the desperate need. France and Germany have managed to rapidly assist India significantly with the supply of cryogenic oxygen tanks, which can store and transport a much bigger quantity of liquid oxygen. Can my honourable friend say what steps our government has taken, or is taking perhaps, to assist similarly, befitting our vision for the UK-India relationship we seek to build?
Minister. Thank my honourable friend, the member for Lincoln, for that point. I'm not particularly aware of the arrangement that France and Germany, whether that's a commercial arrangement that the Indian government has entered into, but it'd be certainly something we can look into. We've been working incredibly closely with our technical experts in the Department of Health on how to respond to the most urgent needs, while ensuring that the equipment sent can be used and will make a difference. Donating oxygen cylinders, as I know some people have called for, has been rejected as compatibility issues would prevent them from being refilled within India. So what we're doing is we're taking the lead from the Indian government on what their most urgent priorities are, so that we can ensure that whatever support we provide matches their requests.
Let's go to Dr. Philippa Whitford. Philippa.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Minister keeps repeating that no one is safe until everyone is safe. But the reality is that 80% of all COVID vaccines have been delivered in just 10 wealthy countries, and COVAX is struggling to obtain vaccines. Unless there is greater international solidarity, other healthcare systems like India's will collapse, and vaccine-resistant variants will inevitably threaten those who live here. Does the Minister not accept that the UK needs to play its part by lifting the ban on exporting vaccines, sharing COVID technology with others, and increasing rather than slashing overseas aid?
Minister.
Well, I'll just say to the honourable lady, I can't think of many countries that are doing more than the United Kingdom on vaccines for the international country. It's absolutely right that we move through the United Kingdom's vaccine priority list for our own rollout. And as I've said in answer to a previous question, currently there are no surplus doses. But of course, you know, I'm proud of the fact that we are one of the biggest donors to COVAX. COVAX will be supporting the distribution of 1.3 billion vaccines across 92 countries that need that support, and this does include India, of course.
Sir Christopher Joel.
Mr. Speaker, may I express strong solidarity with my honourable friend in his words of sympathy with our Indian friends. Can I ask my honourable friend whether it's going to be possible for Indian citizens who are living here in the United Kingdom to travel to India, should they so wish, so that they can help their grieving relatives or provide other support? Because it will surely be unreasonable that we should prevent people leaving our country who wish to go and help in these circumstances.
Minister.
Well, of course, I absolutely get the point that the honourable gentleman has raised. Of course, people will be incredibly worried. I've got friends of my own who got Indian heritage, and they're at their wits' end about what's happening in India. In terms of travelling to India, you'll be aware that we did add India to our red list. That was to ensure that we protect against any variants and against other developing variants. The situation in India has deteriorated. Currently, travel abroad is against the law, and until that situation changes, then people in the UK need to be mindful of the travel advice.
Let's go to Chiamwara. Chi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've spoken to Newcastle's Hindu temple, who emphasised just how distressing these desperate scenes from India are for those with friends and family living there, and indeed for all of us. We have known of concerns for some time now. That's why the Prime Minister cancelled his visit. In giving us special links to India, what conversations has he had with counterparts in the United States and the European Union to ensure that international assistance is coordinated and effective?
Of course, it's a very good question from the Honourable Lady. We regularly are in contact with our counterparts, coordinating support. That's why COVAX was set up in the first place on vaccines. I understand the EU of also coordinating, or in the process of coordinating, support for this emergency. I'm not entirely sure when their shipments arrive, but they're certainly on the case, as is the United States. But rest assured, we do speak to our international partners when an emergency like this flares up.
David Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think everyone in the country has been distressed by the images of the reports they've seen in India, and I welcome my honourable friend's statement about the equipment we've provided and the speed at which we've done so. Obviously, India is a vastly different size to the UK, but if it's wanted, will we also provide logistical advice from the NHS, the Army, our scientists about the things they've learnt of how you best control the spread of this virus and get vaccinations to people as quickly as possible?
Minister.
Of course, we stand ready to, the Honourable Member for Wantage raises a very good point. We stand ready to provide support in whichever form it comes and that's why we're talking to the Indian government, asking them what support they require. We need to do that so that we can best match and understand what they require, and what we supply are in lockstep. And of course, given the situation, how the pandemic is spreading, we're working closely with the Indian counterparts to ensure coordination, also with other countries, so that we support those with the most urgent need.
Let's go to Khalid Mahmood. Khalid.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I commend the support that the government's providing promptly to the Indian people during this devastating COVID surge, and my thoughts and prayer are all those affected by this surge. Is it not realistically, in order to tackle this issue, is to start providing licenses for those countries, particularly in the subcontinent where India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, you're talking about almost 2 billion people that could be dealt with by actually giving them the vaccines that they can produce themselves and therefore better look after themselves and help reduce the effect of COVID very quickly. And further, will you look at the supporting the people of Kashmir who've been under lockdown because of India for the last 18 months, that they receive their fair proportion of the aid and the vaccines that we're supporting them with?
Minister.
Well, the honourable gentleman makes a very good point, but of course we are providing support to the Indian government. It is for the Indian government to decide, not for us to dictate where that support goes or how it's rolled out. And of course, India is one of the largest manufacturers of vaccine, as the honourable gentleman will know. And of course, he will know that those supplies are under pressure, like they are, with all manufacturers. But we will continue liaising with the Indian government, find out what it is they require, and if we can match their demands, we will supply it.
Let's go to Bob Blackburn. Bob.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I congratulate my honourable friend and the Foreign and Commonwealth Development Office for their offer of help and provision that has been made to the Indian government. He will know that at a time of humanitarian crisis, the people of this country are incredibly generous. The Indian diaspora, in particular, are conducting fundraising events via temples and other religious places across the country this weekend, including the world-famous Neasden Temple that is doing a static sponsored bike ride for 7,600 kilometres, the distance between London and New Delhi. What advice is being given to those religious organisations who are raising money to make sure the money gets to the right place at the right time to assist in alleviating the suffering going on in India?
Well, there are many champions of constituents of Indian heritage in this House, no more so than my honourable friend, the member for Harrow East. There are some, I've been made aware of some incredible fundraising efforts across the country where there are large Indian diaspora people raising money through various means, and it's really heartwarming to see. It's absolutely the case that needs to be delivered in the most efficient way. I will find through what mechanism, I'll find out through what mechanism that advice is being filtered down to those communities. He raises a brilliant point, as ever, and I'll make sure that by the end of today, he's able to have some information to take to his communities to ensure they're doing the right thing. I'm sure everybody is doing the right thing, it's just to make sure it's delivered in the correct way.
Stephen Bowen.
Mr Speaker, only last week I stood here and questioned this Tory government's obscene betrayal of those in need by cutting the foreign age budget. This week we have perhaps seen the direct consequences of such decisions, and I'm sure, along with every member, they agree with me that the scenes from India are nothing short of devastating, and we cannot stand idly by while oxygen becomes a premium and not an easily obtainable necessity. So, given the severity of the situation, will the Minister now go on record to say that the UK Government will undertake any and every possible measure of support to India and her people, including the potential distribution of vaccines when we're in a position to do so?
Minister.
Oh, I agree with the honourable gentleman's sentiments, apart from his first sentence, which I noted was a mild dig. However, we will continue to support India. We were the first country to do so when this crisis flared up. We weren't talking about it, we're actually getting on with it and doing it, delivering ventilators and oxygen concentrators. There are more in the air now that are going to land today and tomorrow. So we are continuing to do that work. And as I said, in terms of vaccines, it'd be great if you could point to me who's doing more in terms of putting more money into COVAX. That's going to help 1.3 billion people. The priority, obviously, is the domestic rollout here for the vaccines that we've got. And once we have a clear idea of surplus, then we will be in a position to support other countries.
Let's go to Jane Stevenson. Jane.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So many of my fellow Wolfrunians have friends, family and other loved ones in India, and I want to thank the government for the swift response to this heartbreaking situation. Could my honourable friend tell me what discussions he's having with our international partners so that we can encourage them to send similar assistance and also ensure that the global effort is as effective as possible?
Minister.
Indeed, my honourable friend, the member for Wolverhampton North East, makes a very good point. And like all honourable and right honourable members today, they're speaking up passionately for those constituents in their particular areas. The cooperation on an international level is absolutely at the heart of responding to this pandemic. It's a pandemic that doesn't recognise borders, obviously, so we've been speaking directly with the Indian government to understand what they need. As I said, we're in regular contact with a range of international partners, Mr. Speaker, making sure that we support, coordinate and do everything we can to respond to the needs of India at this difficult time.
Let's go to Zara Sultana. Zara.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The images from India are horrifying. From people gasping for air and dying in the streets, with hospitals overrun, to seas of blazing makeshift fires. This is a human catastrophe for India, and with a virus that does not respect borders, none of us are safe until we are all safe. Vaccine supply is artificially limited by patents, leading to the global vaccine apartheid. At the World Trade Organization, India and South Africa have proposed a temporary waiver to vaccine people, allowing production to expand. Public money funded these vaccines. So will the government put public health, before the profits of Big Pharma and support a waiver for COVID vaccine patent?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I think the audio was a bit sort of in and out there, but I think I got the gist of the Honourable Lady's question. We are doing an immense amount. I've said it several times during my response. We're at the forefront of efforts to ensure that vaccines are getting to the most vulnerable countries, those in developing countries, not only being, I think, the second or third largest donor to the COVAX programme. And I would just gently remind the Honourable Lady that support is going to assist 1.3 billion people in the low and middle countries across the globe. This, of course, includes India, a country where we've seen such horrific scenes, and our hearts are with them.
Marco Lobby. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the Minister agree that the coronavirus pandemic has demonstrated more than ever before the absolute need for strong and reliable partners, especially in the interconnected world that we all live in? And can he confirm that the Prime Minister will in fact be visiting India as soon as the country recovers from this dreadful outbreak?
Minister.
Indeed, my honourable friend, the member for Dudley North, raises a very good point. I mean, the irony is the Prime Minister would have been in India had it not been for this latest outbreak in India. I know he's going to be speaking to Prime Minister Modi shortly via video link. We want to make sure we continue that cooperation on trade, defence, climate change, on health as well, which is key, absolutely key. So what we want to do is finalise a 2030 roadmap for India-UK future relations, and this will provide a strategic basis for our relationship in the coming years. So we look forward to the Prime Minister meeting Prime Minister Modi as soon as practically possible, and there may be an opportunity, depending on how the pandemic goes in India, for the Prime Minister to visit in person later this year.
Let's go to Navendra Mishra. Navendra.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the Honourable Member for Wigan for securing this urgent question. I have family in India, and like others, I've found the news from the country quite distressing. Mr. Speaker, does the government believe that people in low and middle income countries should have fair and timely access to life-saving COVID vaccines and drugs? If so, is the government willing to reverse its position on opposing the proposal from India and South Africa of a patent waiver in relation to COVID vaccines, medicines and medical equipment at the World Trade Organization?
Well, I can tell the honourable gentleman we agree that countries, low and middle income countries, should have equitable access to vaccines. That's why we're putting the over £500 million worth of UK taxpayers' money into the COVAX arrangement. And also, 1.3 billion people in those countries are going to be assisted by these vaccines that are going to be provided.
Sir Budley.
Over the years, quite a few people, I must admit, even including myself, have questioned aspects of international aid and its efficiency. But I wonder if the Minister will acknowledge that public opinion is changing in the middle of a global pandemic, that international aid isn't just a moral duty, we're part of one humanity, and if health systems around the world collapse, then sooner or later it comes back to bite us. So in that respect, can the Minister give a categorical assurance that the recent budget cuts in overseas aid would have not affected in any way our ability to help the world's poorest countries deal with this global pandemic?
Minister.
Well, my right honourable friend makes a very good point, and the total amount that FCDO will spend on global health is £1.3 billion. We'll focus on the this will be focused on the UK's position at the forefront of the international response to COVID. This is not just through our commitments with COVAX and the vaccines I've been talking about, but also with the Gavi Alliance and through the WHO. And basically our investment will be, and expertise will be on issues where we can make the most difference and achieve maximum impact and value for money.
Let's go to Christine Jardine. Christine.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. As many honourable members have said, the images from India are both difficult to watch and painful for many of our constituents with family there. And in the light of what is happening, can I ask the Minister whether the 1.3 billion, which he has mentioned, which is going into COVID relief worldwide, how much of that is going to India, and whether it will be reviewed and possibly in light of what is happening across the world with a view to upgrading it?
I think the Honourable Lady was referring to, if she could nod, whether this is the case, if she was referring to the 1.3 billion doses, vaccine doses. Of course, we have made our commitment and our financial commitment to COVAX. They will make the decisions on where those vaccines will go to those 92 low and middle income countries. That's not a decision the UK takes, but this will be taken strategically by COVAX and through the advanced market commitment that they are operating. But we've committed the money, we're paying the money, and we should be proud of the support the United Kingdom is giving in terms of support for international vaccines.
Claire Coutinho, Claire.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Like the 1.5 million other members of the British Indian diaspora, I've been watching with my heart in my mouth, worried for friends and families in India over the last few weeks. Could I just put on record and ask the Minister to join with me my thanks to all the officials, the government ministers, and also the private sector businesses which have been involved, not only in our work on COVAX, I think we were the largest donor up till December last year, to our work with AstraZeneca, which is doing crucial work providing vaccines to the world poorest, and to our deliveries of oxygen as well.
Well, can I thank my honourable friend for her thanks in this regard. There is an extraordinary amount of work that's been done, not just by government, and she was right to mention the private sector, who have stepped up with this pandemic. It's been an incredible international joined-up effort under extreme circumstances, but I really do want to commend the work, not just of the FCDO, but across government in ensuring that this initial shipment got out to India with great speed. We were the first to deliver equipment, and there'll be more to come, but I will certainly ensure that her thanks are amplified to the relevant parties.
Damarjit Singh Desi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. At a time when India is registering the highest ever recorded cases globally of COVID, we must help the Indian people in their hour of need. I have close family there, and many of my Slough constituents are extremely anxious about their loved ones, terrified after seeing apocalyptic scenes of people dying on the streets for want of oxygen, a collapsing health system, and crematoriums and cemeteries being overwhelmed with thousands of people dying every day. So I'm sure the Minister will join me in commending the incredible work of volunteers, including British-based charities. But given our close historical ties, will he ensure that the UK is the #1 aid donor, especially of medical expertise and equipment, including ventilators and oxygen concentrators?
Well, the honourable member for Slough makes a very good point, and we are indeed committed to supporting the Government of India. As I've said on a number of occasions here, we were first out of the blocks. I know other international partners are going to be doing exactly the same. Of course, there are close historical ties, there are family ties with India right across this House, and we will ensure we're at the forefront of this support. We're doing it. There is more to come. There will be more information when we've concluded our current conversations with the Indian government in terms of what we're going to be supplying. But rest assured, he can rest assured, the whole House can rest assured that the United Kingdom government is doing its bit to support the Indian people.
Order. I'm now suspending the House for 2 minutes to enable the necessary arrangements to be made for the next business.